The prison looked calm from the outside. Tall gray walls stood under a cloudy sky. Watchtowers looked over every corner. Heavy steel gates stayed locked every second of the day. To most people, it looked like the safest place in America. But inside, something impossible was happening. Every morning, guards changed schedules without asking questions. Certain doors opened at strange times. Packages disappeared before anyone checked them. Fights broke out exactly where someone wanted them to. Even the toughest inmates lowered their voices whenever one man's name was whispered. His name was Marcus Reed. The shocking part, Marcus had not stepped outside his tiny prison cell in weeks. His cell was only a few feet wide. One metal bed, one small sink, one tiny window covered with thick bars. Cameras watched him every hour. Guards checked on him all day. Yet somehow, the entire prison seemed to move whenever Marcus made a decision. If Marcus wanted someone protected, nobody touched that person. If Marcus wanted someone moved to another block, it happened. If Marcus wanted the prison quiet, it became silent. Even the prison staff started wondering if they were following their own rules, or Marcus's. Then one rainy night, every light inside the prison suddenly went out. Darkness covered every hallway. The backup alarms failed. The electronic doors unlocked one after another. When the emergency lights finally flickered back on, every inmate was standing perfectly still. Nobody was yelling. Nobody was running. Instead, hundreds of prisoners were looking toward one hallway, waiting. Waiting for orders. Orders from a man who was still locked inside his cell. The prison warden stared at the security screens in complete disbelief. Then one officer whispered words nobody would ever forget. "He controls this prison." But how could one inmate take control of an entire prison without ever leaving his cell? To understand that impossible night, we have to go back several months. Marcus Reed arrived at Blackstone State Prison on a cold Monday morning. He was 38 years old. He had short brown hair, calm blue eyes, and an expression that almost never changed. He did not shout. He did not threaten anyone. He simply carried one small box holding everything he owned. The officers expected trouble because Marcus had a long criminal history involving fraud, bribery, and leading a large criminal organization outside prison. He had never been known for fighting. Instead, investigators believed he used information, money, and careful planning to influence people around him. That reputation made prison officials watch him closely from the very beginning. Most new inmates tried to act tough. Marcus did not. He thanked the officer who searched him. He quietly walked to his assigned cell. He smiled politely at the guard locking the heavy steel door. That strange calm made everyone uncomfortable. Officer Daniel Brooks had worked at Blackstone for almost 20 years. He believed he could read people within minutes. When he looked into Marcus's eyes, something felt different. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was patience. "Keep watching him," Brooks quietly told another officer. "I plan to." For the first week, Marcus followed every prison rule. He woke up on time. He cleaned his cell. He ate without speaking much. He never joined arguments. He never caused problems. Some officers even started believing the reports about him had been exaggerated. But the inmates saw something the guards missed. Every time Marcus entered the cafeteria, conversations slowly stopped. Not because he demanded respect. Because people were waiting for him to notice them. One afternoon, a nervous young inmate named Tyler accidentally dropped his food tray near Marcus's table. The loud crash echoed through the room. Everyone froze. Tyler quickly apologized and reached down to clean the mess. Marcus simply helped him pick up the tray. "No problem," Marcus said quietly. That small act surprised everyone. Later that evening, Tyler returned safely to his housing block without anyone bothering him. Inside Blackstone Prison, that almost never happened to new inmates. People started asking questions. Why had everyone suddenly left Tyler alone? Who had told them to back off? Nobody saw Marcus speak to anyone. Nobody heard him give an order. Yet somehow, the message had spread through the prison before sunset. 3 days later, Officer Brooks reviewed the security footage from the cafeteria. He wanted to understand what had happened. He watched every camera, every hallway, every table, every conversation. Then he noticed something that made his heart race. Marcus had never spoken to the prison's toughest inmates. He had only looked at them for a single second. And somehow, every one of them understood exactly what to do. Just as Brooks reached for the phone to alert the warden, a loud emergency alarm exploded through the prison, followed by a radio call that sent every officer running. Someone had just broken into the prison's secure records room. The loud alarm echoed through every hallway. Red emergency lights flashed across the prison walls. Officers grabbed their radios and rushed toward the secure records room. Heavy boots pounded on the concrete floors as doors slammed open one after another. Officer Daniel Brooks was one of the first to arrive. The steel door to the records room was hanging open. The electronic lock had not been forced. It had been unlocked using the correct security code. Brooks frowned. "Who has access to this room?" he asked. "Only senior staff," another officer answered. Inside, file cabinets stood open. Papers covered the floor. Computer screens were still glowing. At first, it looked like someone had searched the room in a hurry. But after a closer look, something became even stranger. Nothing had been stolen. Every file was still there. Every computer was still in place. Whoever entered the room had not come to take anything. They had come to read something. The prison warden, James Carter, arrived moments later. "Lock the prison down," he ordered. "Nobody moves until we know what happened." Within minutes, every housing unit was sealed. Inmates returned to their cells. Officers searched every hallway. The cameras were checked. The visitor logs were reviewed. But nothing made sense. No stranger had entered the prison. No guard reported suspicious activity. It was as if the person had appeared out of nowhere. Brooks could not stop thinking about Marcus Reed. Marcus had been locked inside his cell the entire time. The cameras proved it. Still, Brooks had a feeling the two events were somehow connected. He walked to Marcus's housing unit. Marcus was sitting quietly on his bunk, reading an old paperback book. He looked up as Brooks stopped outside the bars. "Busy night?" Marcus asked with a calm smile. Brooks did not answer right away. Instead, he studied Marcus's face. There was no panic, no surprise. Almost as if Marcus already knew why the alarms had sounded. "Did you hear about the records room?" Brooks finally asked. Marcus closed his book. "Everyone hears everything in prison," he replied. Brooks leaned closer. "Do you know who broke in?" Marcus shrugged. "I know people make choices." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Brooks left without another word. Marcus never admitted to anything. But somehow Brooks felt he had learned less after the conversation than before it. The next morning, life inside Blackstone looked normal again. Breakfast was served. Cells opened on schedule. Work crews reported for their assignments. Yet something had changed. Small groups of inmates whispered to each other. Whenever Marcus walked through the hallway under escort, conversations stopped. No one challenged him. No one even looked directly at him for very long. Tyler, the young inmate Marcus had helped in the cafeteria, noticed it too. He quietly asked another prisoner, "Why is everyone scared of him?" The older inmate looked around before answering. "They're not scared. They're careful." "What's the difference?" The older man lowered his voice. "Fear makes people run. Marcus makes people listen." Tyler wanted to ask more questions. Instead, the older inmate stood up and walked away. That afternoon, Officer Brooks met with Warden Carter. "I think Reed is involved," Brooks said. "He's been locked in his cell," Carter replied. "I know. So how could he organize anything? I can't explain it." The warden sighed. "Suspicion isn't evidence." "I understand. Keep watching him. Quietly." Brooks nodded. For the next several days, Marcus was watched more closely than any inmate in the prison. Extra cameras covered his cell. His mail was inspected. His phone calls were recorded. His visitors were carefully searched. Nothing unusual appeared. Marcus spent most of his time reading books, exercising, or writing in a small notebook. Everything looked ordinary. Almost too ordinary. Then another strange event happened. An argument broke out between two rival inmate groups during lunch. The room became loud. Chairs scraped across the floor. Several men stood up, ready to fight. Officers rushed toward them. Everyone expected a violent brawl. Instead, Marcus slowly looked up from his meal. He did not shout. He did not stand. He simply folded his hands on the table. Within seconds, the two groups sat back down. The shouting stopped. The cafeteria became completely silent. Even the officers froze. No one understood what had just happened. After lunch, Brooks questioned several inmates separately. Each one gave the same answer. "I don't know. I didn't see anything. I changed my mind." None of them mentioned Marcus. But every surveillance camera showed the exact same thing. The fight ended the moment Marcus looked across the room. That evening, Brooks reviewed the footage again and again. He slowed it down. He zoomed in. Then he noticed something tiny. Just before everyone calmed down, one inmate near Marcus tapped his finger twice on the table. Another inmate across the room nodded almost invisibly. Then another. Then another. The signal spread through the cafeteria like falling dominoes. No words. No shouting. Just silent messages traveling from one person to the next. By the time the signal reached the last table, every inmate had received the same instruction. Stop. Brooks stared at the screen. Marcus had not controlled the room with magic. He had built a secret communication system that worked right in front of everyone. Brooks rushed to the warden's office with the video. But before he could knock on the door, every radio in the prison suddenly came alive with frightened voices. "Officer down. This is Unit C. We need medical assistance immediately." Brooks turned and ran. As he reached Unit C, he stopped in shock. An unconscious correctional officer lay on the floor. Next to him was a sealed envelope. Written across the front in large black letters were 5 chilling words. "This is only the beginning." Officer Daniel Brooks carefully picked up the envelope. He looked around the hallway. Several officers were helping the injured guard, whose pulse was steady but weak. The prison nurse quickly arrived and confirmed that the officer had likely been knocked unconscious during a surprise attack. He was breathing, but he remembered very little. Brooks opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. There was no fingerprint, no signature, only one typed sentence. "You are looking at the wrong people." Brooks read it twice. The message made his stomach tighten. Was someone trying to confuse the investigation? Or was someone warning him? The unconscious officer was taken to the prison medical unit. Fortunately, doctors believed he would recover. That was a relief for everyone, but it also created more questions. Who had attacked him? Why leave a message behind? The prison immediately entered another lockdown. Every inmate returned to his cell. Every staff member was questioned. Every hallway was searched again. Still, investigators found almost nothing. The security cameras showed the officer walking alone toward Unit C. Then, for just 12 seconds, one camera lost its video feed. When the picture returned, the officer was already lying on the floor. 12 seconds. That was all it took. Brooks could hardly believe it. Later that evening, Warden James Carter called an emergency meeting. "We have a serious problem," he said. "Someone understands this prison better than we do." The room stayed silent. "We are adding more patrols. We are changing guard schedules. We are replacing every security code." Everyone agreed. It sounded like the right plan. But Marcus Reed remained unusually calm. The next morning, Brooks stopped outside Marcus's cell. Marcus was reading another book. "You've been busy," Brooks said. Marcus looked up. "I've been reading. You know that's not what I mean." Marcus smiled slightly. "You think I control everything. I think people listen to you." Marcus closed his book. "There is a difference." "What difference?" "You can force people to obey." He paused. "Or you can make them believe it was their own idea." Brooks felt a chill. Those words stayed in his mind long after he walked away. Days passed. The new security measures seemed to work. No alarms. No missing files. No strange messages. The prison slowly returned to its normal routine. Some officers even started believing the mystery was over. Then something unexpected happened. A maintenance worker reported finding tiny folded pieces of paper hidden inside the library books. The notes were very short. One said, "Tomorrow." Another said, "Wait." Another simply showed a small circle with a line through it. None of them mentioned names. None of them broke any obvious prison rule. But someone had carefully hidden them where inmates would eventually find them. Brooks gathered every note he could find. He spread them across his desk. At first, they looked meaningless. Random words. Random symbols. Then he noticed something. The books where the notes had been hidden were always checked out in a certain order. When he arranged the notes using that order, a message appeared. "Move after lights out." Brooks immediately alerted the warden. The prison prepared for trouble. Extra officers waited near every housing unit. Emergency response teams stood ready. The lights went out exactly on schedule that night. Everything stayed quiet. 1 minute passed. Then another. Nothing happened. Brooks almost laughed at himself. Maybe the message had been old. Maybe someone was playing games. Then he heard footsteps. Not running. Walking. Slow. Calm. He looked down the main hallway. Several inmates were quietly returning from approved work assignments. Everything looked normal. Until Brooks realized something. Every inmate walking down the hallway had switched places with another inmate somewhere along the route. No rules had been broken. No doors had been forced. But dozens of prisoners were now standing in different locations than where officers expected them to be. The changes looked small. Yet together, they completely confused the officers trying to count inmates. It took almost an hour to confirm everyone was accounted for. Who had organized something so precise? Brooks checked every camera again. He never saw Marcus speak to anyone. He never saw Marcus pass a note. Yet the silent chain of communication had worked perfectly once again. The next afternoon, Brooks received surprising news. The injured officer had finally regained his memory. Brooks hurried to the medical unit. "What do you remember?" he asked. The officer took a deep breath. "I wasn't attacked from behind." Brooks frowned. "What do you mean?" "I turned the corner. And I saw someone standing there." "Who?" The officer closed his eyes. "I've never seen him before." "An inmate." "I don't know." "What happened next?" He smiled. "Then he said." The officer hesitated. He said, "Tell Brooks he's getting closer." Brooks felt his heartbeat quicken. "Then what?" "I suddenly felt dizzy. The next thing I remember is waking up here." The doctors believed the officer had likely been struck after the encounter, though they could not determine exactly how. Whoever had done it had escaped before anyone arrived. Brooks walked back into the hallway, thinking about those words. "Tell Brooks he's getting closer." Getting closer to what? To Marcus? Or to someone even more powerful? Before Brooks could answer that question, every emergency siren inside Blackstone Prison suddenly began screaming at once. A panicked voice burst over the radio. "Control room breach. Someone has taken over the prison's security system." The emergency sirens echoed through every building at Blackstone Prison. Officer Daniel Brooks sprinted toward the control room with several other officers close behind. The sound of boots hitting the concrete floor filled the hallways. Every second felt longer than the last. When they reached the control room, the heavy steel door was locked from the inside. "Open the door!" Brooks shouted. No one answered. An officer quickly used an emergency key. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside, the room was a mess. Computer monitors flashed warning messages. Security cameras switched from one screen to another without stopping. Some cameras showed empty hallways. Others displayed frozen pictures from several minutes earlier. The control system was no longer working correctly. The two officers who had been assigned to the room were safe, but they looked shaken. "We don't know what happened," one of them said. "The screens just started changing by themselves." "The doors?" Brooks asked. "They're still locked, but the computer isn't following our commands." Brooks immediately called the warden. Within minutes, technicians arrived and disconnected the prison's computer network from the outside world. Slowly, the camera system returned to normal. The prison remained secure. No inmates had escaped. No one had been seriously hurt. But someone had managed to interrupt one of the prison's most important systems. That alone was deeply troubling. As the technicians searched through the computer logs, they found something unexpected. The system had not been hacked from outside. Instead, someone had used an authorized employee account. The account belonged to a staff member who had been on vacation for 3 days. "That's impossible," Warden James Carter said. "Unless someone used his login information," Brooks replied. The investigation grew even larger. Staff members were interviewed again. Passwords were changed. Access cards were replaced. Everyone was reminded to protect their security information. Still, one question remained. Who had planned all of this? Later that afternoon, Brooks decided to speak with Marcus Reed one more time. Marcus was quietly writing in his notebook. "You've heard about the control room," Brooks said. Marcus nodded. "News travels fast." Brooks crossed his arms. "Every strange event seems to happen while you're here." Marcus looked up. "Strange things happened before I arrived. But now they happen more often." Marcus smiled gently. "Maybe you're noticing them now." Brooks stared at him. "You always answer questions with another question." Marcus closed his notebook. "Sometimes people search for one person when they should be searching for an idea." Brooks left the cell more confused than ever. That evening, he returned to his office. He spread every report across his desk. The records room, the hidden notes, the silent signals, the cafeteria, the control room. He studied each event carefully. Then he noticed something he had missed before. Every incident had happened shortly after a routine delivery entered the prison. Food deliveries, laundry deliveries, office supplies. Nothing unusual by themselves. But each event followed one of those deliveries within a day. Brooks checked the records. The same delivery company had served Blackstone Prison for years. Their drivers passed background checks. Their trucks were inspected. Still, Brooks wondered if someone was quietly passing information during those deliveries. The next morning, he asked permission to observe the delivery area. The warden agreed. 4 hours, Brooks watched workers unload boxes. Everything appeared normal. Drivers signed paperwork. Guards checked the cargo. Nothing seemed suspicious. Then Brooks noticed something small. One delivery worker accidentally dropped a clipboard. As another worker picked it up, they exchanged only a quick glance. It lasted less than a second. Maybe it meant nothing. Or maybe it meant everything. Brooks quietly wrote down both workers' names for investigators to review later. As the day continued, another surprise arrived. The prison technician rushed into the warden's office carrying a printed report. "We found something," she said. "What is it?" Carter asked. "The security logs." Brooks stepped closer. The employee account wasn't the first one used. "What do you mean?" "Someone logged into the system using 3 different authorized accounts." 3. She nodded. "They were used weeks apart. So this wasn't a single mistake." "No. This was planned." The room became silent. Whoever was behind the mystery had been patient, careful, always one step ahead. That evening, Officer Brooks walked alone through one of the prison hallways. He passed Marcus's cell. Marcus was standing by the small window, looking outside at the dark sky. Without turning around, Marcus spoke. "You're getting closer." Brooks stopped. Those were the same words the injured officer had remembered. Brooks slowly turned. "What do you know?" Marcus finally faced him. "I know this prison has secrets." "What secrets?" Marcus looked directly into Brooks's eyes. "The biggest mistake you're making." He paused. is believing there is only one person pulling the strings. Before Brooks could ask another question, every light in Marcus's housing unit suddenly went dark. Emergency generators powered on a few seconds later. The lights returned. Brooks looked back toward Marcus's cell. Marcus was still standing exactly where he had been. But something else had changed. On the floor, just inside the bars of Marcus's locked cell, lay a folded piece of paper that had not been there moments before. Brooks carefully picked it up through the food slot. He unfolded it. There were only 6 words written across the page. "The real leader is already free." Officer Daniel Brooks stared at the note. "The real leader is already free." The words echoed in his mind. For months, everyone inside Blackstone State Prison had believed Marcus Reed was the one controlling everything. Every strange event seemed to point toward him. Every clue seemed to lead back to his tiny prison cell. But what if Marcus had never been the true leader? Brooks rushed to Warden James Carter's office with the note. The warden read it twice. "If this is true," Carter said quietly, "we've been chasing the wrong person." Brooks spread every report across the conference table. The hidden notes. The cafeteria signals. The records room break-in. The control room incident. The delivery schedules. One by one, the pieces finally began to fit together. Marcus had influence inside the prison. That much was clear. But influence was not the same as control. Someone outside the prison had been carefully coordinating information with people inside. Marcus became the face everyone focused on while the real organizer stayed hidden. "He was the distraction," Brooks said. The warden nodded. "And while we watched him, someone else stayed invisible." The investigation quickly expanded beyond the prison walls. Federal investigators joined the case. Phone records were reviewed under legal authority. Financial records connected to the criminal organization were carefully examined. Several former associates of Marcus were questioned. Then investigators found the missing piece. One delivery driver had been secretly passing coded messages between members of the criminal organization. The messages were hidden inside ordinary paperwork that looked completely harmless. Prison staff had inspected the deliveries for dangerous items, but no one realized the paperwork itself carried coded instructions. The driver admitted that he had been paid by a former member of Marcus's criminal network. That former member was a man named Ethan Cole. Years earlier, Ethan had worked quietly behind the scenes while Marcus received all the attention. When Marcus was sent to prison, everyone assumed the organization had fallen apart. Instead, Ethan had taken control. He stayed out of the public eye. He avoided attention. He let everyone believe Marcus was still running everything. It was the perfect cover. Inside Blackstone, Marcus still had respect from many inmates. Sometimes he gave advice. Sometimes people listened to him. But investigators found no evidence that he had ordered the attacks or directed the crimes committed during the recent investigation. Marcus had allowed people to believe he was still in charge because it protected him from rivals and kept his reputation alive. But Ethan had quietly used that reputation for his own plans. Within days, investigators tracked Ethan to a small warehouse several states away. Law enforcement officers surrounded the building. After a brief standoff, Ethan surrendered peacefully. Computers, coded documents, phones, and financial records were recovered. The evidence connected him to the message system, the delivery driver, and the plan to influence people both inside and outside the prison. The mystery that had frightened Blackstone for months was finally solved. Back at the prison, life slowly returned to normal. Security procedures were improved. Computer systems received stronger protection. Staff received additional training to recognize coded communication and suspicious patterns. Officer Brooks visited Marcus one last time. Marcus was sitting on his bunk with the same old book in his hands. "It's over," Brooks said. Marcus looked up. "I heard. You knew someone else was leading the organization." Marcus nodded slowly. "I guessed. You never told us." Marcus sighed. "You never asked the right question." Brooks thought about that for a moment. Then he smiled. "This time we finally did." Marcus gave a small nod. Neither man said another word. As Brooks walked away, he looked down the long prison hallway. For the first time in months, it felt quiet. Not because anyone was controlling it. Because the truth had finally reached everyone. The story of Blackstone State Prison became one of the most talked about criminal investigations in the country. It reminded investigators that the loudest suspect is not always the one responsible, and that careful teamwork, patience, and evidence, not assumptions, are what solve complex crimes. People would always remember the unbelievable rumor that an inmate had controlled an entire prison from his cell. The truth was even more surprising. Marcus Reed had convinced almost everyone that he was still the most powerful man behind bars. Meanwhile, the real criminal leader had been hiding in plain sight, free on the outside, using deception, coded messages, and other people to keep his organization alive. In the end, it was not strength that brought the case to a close. It was careful investigation, persistence, and the determination to follow the evidence wherever it led. Thank you for watching. Follow for more true crime stories. Crimythrax.